program is rated PG. It contains themes and scenes which may not be suitable for very young audiences. Parental guidance is advised.
Be advised that the views and opinions of the hosts and guests do not reflect those of the station.
In this edition of Journeys, Chronicles of Our Asian Century, we will start with the Philippine-China focus. This week we had a very significant Filipino member of the intelligentsia, a writer, an author, and a columnist in the Manila Standard, who caught international attention because of what he wrote. We will introduce him a little later after you watch this clip from CCTV 9 of their interview with this individual.
President Aquino gambled on our national sovereignty and pride. He exploited the so-called nationalist sentiment or blind jingoism, which is not good. Many Filipinos will be sacrificed for a war, which, if you will have to look back, is a kind of war that was initiated by the Aquino administration. It was not initiated by China. That's my position. There is no way we can win in that case.
Kapunan says whatever the result, the Philippines will lose opportunities to cooperate with China and huge potential economic benefits. Kapunan believes the U.S.'s motivation to support the Philippines in escalating tensions in the South China Sea is to strengthen its military presence in the region. Philippine President-elect Rodrigo Duterte has been left with a thorny legacy.
That even the succeeding administration will have difficulty in changing our foreign policy course, because the act alone of filing a case is something that carries with it a repercussion that it will result in a national humiliation to withdraw the case. And that's why Duterte will think about it. He will slowly pull that out. I hope he will pull that out. Because it will not bring us to nowhere. Something like we will only end up in a conflict with China.
Okay, you heard Mr. Rod Kapunan there, and he is now with us on our show Journeys, Chronicles of Our Asian Century, and we will try to find out what prompted him to write this article that has made such an impact. Rod, have all the time you need to explain your article.
Well, first, let me thank you for giving me this opportunity, because this time I will be able to elaborate what I mean, There are two positions that we can select. Either we file the case or engage China in a direct, peaceful negotiation. Either way, when we file the case, it's a lose-lose proposition. First, if we lose in our case, we will be forced to vacate on those islands we presently occupied, because that implies that we agree or subscribe to the ruling of that arbitration court. Remember, we voluntarily applied before the arbitration court to settle our problems with China. Supposing, this is only a theoretical equation, supposing the arbitration court decides against us. So, it can also be asked, will you vacate if in case we decide against you? That's one thing, It's a losing proposition. Now, on the other hand, if we win in our case before the Permanent Arbitration Court, the next question is, can we enforce that? I'm not saying that China will be acting as a bully in that case. All that China will say is that we never subscribed nor submitted to the jurisdiction of the arbitration court. Therefore, it cannot be enforced against us. Unilaterally, you decided the case against us. We already notified you that we will not join, participate, or agree by whatever decision the arbitration court may come out. So, where will you go now?
Well, those people trying to sell the Filipino people this idea of the arbitration case and trying to persuade the Filipino people that this was the right thing to do, they say China will be forced to accept it, number one, or China will be shamed, and number three, will be so isolated that they will be forced to comply with the decision. Isolate, that is very important. They will say they are the only ones who will not be subject to the rule of law. And number four, in fact, Justice Tony Carpio said that even the United States was forced to comply in the case of Nicaragua versus the United States. I don't know if you're familiar with that case, but I can fill you in later on that case.
I read that case, and it has nothing to do with jurisdiction. The United States simply complied with the decision of the arbitration court for payment of damages.
Well, in fact, my study shows that they did not comply, but they provided aid for a new government that they supported, Chamorro, remember?
That's Chamorro,
Yeah,
yes.
Chamorro, yeah.
That's it. But it has nothing to do with jurisdiction.
Precisely, I agree with that.
More with damages, payment of damages.
But I wanted to point that out because the Chief Justice went to the extent, if what we read in the papers is true, lying to the Filipino people to make the Filipino people swallow this line that even the powerful will be forced to comply. When even China has from the very beginning said very clearly they are not going to have any part of it. So for me, that's very important. Now, let's go to the other 3 points that we mentioned. Isolated, is China isolated in this case?
I don't know if it's possible. We can never isolate China. Let me clarify another point. By the way, if after filing the case, we will have difficulty in trying to pull that out. Even if the succeeding leadership, like Duterte, may agree, as I've said, I already mentioned this, that for indirect negotiations with China, remember, there are sizable pro-American population in this country. I do not know if Duterte can just easily withdraw the case because it will result in a national humiliation.
Yes. And,
it's a national humiliation, and it is something that the next president will have to think. Most probably, he will try to delay that, but there would be a backdoor negotiation like telling China, we will just keep the case pending, and after that, we will withdraw the case. Because the consequence is too serious. But supposing the arbitration case will decide in our favor, do we have the capacity to enforce that?
Yes,
no.
precisely. Yeah.
And again, we have not asked the United States, will the United States side with us in the enforcement of that decision? I doubt it very much.
That's right, yeah. Well, I suppose our government can just, as the saying goes, let sleeping dogs lie and pursue. And in fact, any initiation of bilateral negotiations will force this case to fade away necessarily, especially if it comes into some constructive agreement, like it ends in a fisheries agreement, it ends in a joint security arrangement, and so on and so forth.
By the way, let me clarify this. If a party asks you for a joint partnership, do you understand its implication? when the Chinese government offered for a joint venture, it
In
actually
1989, Deng Xiaoping to Cory Aquino, right?
it actually means that, legally speaking, half of the business is yours.
Yeah.
Half of the business is yours. And if the Chinese government offered that to us, there is no reason why the Chinese will revoke the offer. Because half of that business is their business, half of that is ours, and the other one is China.
Yeah.
We should have accepted that. While we are not talking of sovereignty, we may perhaps invent a new concept which is called joint sovereignty.
That's right.
Joint
I was
ownership.
going to say that. And so you have joint security
Yes.
interest
Yes.
and therefore joint security patrol.
And we insist in
It is like now there is joint security patrol in the southern borders of the Philippines with Indonesia and Malaysia because of the cases of Abu Sayyaf kidnappings
Yes.
of Indonesians and
Yes.
Malaysians. So we can have joint security patrols with or arrangements with China.
I think this is the latest kind of arrangement that was reached between China and Vietnam.
In Beibu Gulf,
Yes.
yes, they have they launched a joint fisheries patrol.
Yes.
If I recall correctly, we reported that news here, but it did not appear in any of our major Philippine newspapers.
That's why I don't understand Senator Trillanes when he was talking about the so-called treason committed by when we abandoned to China the so-called Scarborough Shoal. No. We did not abandon that. We initiated a fight with China, and we do not have the capability to enforce that. Before, let us put it straight. I'm not trying siding with anybody here. Filipinos were allowed to fish in that area, and so with the Chinese. When the Philippine government decided to occupy the entire area and drive out the Chinese fishermen,
That's right, in 2012.
Yes.
Sending in a gray ship, a naval ship, which was a very big mistake.
the Chinese retaliated by doing the same against our own fishermen, and now we cannot even enter the area. That's what I'm telling you. We should have accepted the joint offer because
in fact, what appears to me is that our past government, meaning if the Duterte government comes in already, the Aquino government with Del Rosario used our fishermen as pawns in this game of theirs. And now it is the fishermen suffering, and they are not even giving them any aid and assistance.
By the way, when we filed our case with the Permanent Arbitration Court, I used the term, we locked ourselves with the devil.
Yes.
We locked ourselves because it would be difficult for us to get out.
Yes.
In Tagalog, napasubo tayo dun.
Yes.
And now, how can we, without losing...
We were put into a corner
It's put
by
in the corner.
our so-called American friends.
American friends. It would be a national humiliation. So I've already mentioned that it will result in a national humiliation. That is one aspect. On the other hand, we cannot enforce that. Where will we go?
Well, I'm glad incoming President Duterte has already been rising above this dilemma. And I think there is no national humiliation that people perceive if he indeed proceeds with the bilateral negotiations and slowly let sleeping dogs lie. Right? Okay, we have 1 minute in this segment. Anything you want to add? I just want to add before you finally close this segment. The China is not isolated because in the past month alone, Russia and India, and then followed by members of ASEAN, Brunei, Laos, and Cambodia, followed by the Arab states in the recent Arab League meeting, and then lately Togo in Africa, stated very clearly such issues such as the South China Sea issue should not be internationalized and that they should be resolved by bilateral negotiation. So that has been put to rest, that point that China will be isolated. And finally, how would you want to wrap this up for our audience?
First, we cannot really... There is logic in the Chinese proposition for a direct negotiation. It simply means that we cannot invite parties who are not involved in the problem. That is the basic. That is the basic formula. If you have nothing to do with this problem, please do not involve yourself or participate in that.
Thank you very much. And hang on, because we'll ask Rod Kapunan to analyze the latest Asian century developments. Okay, let's take this break.